If you've ever consumed any media about personal finance before, you've almost certainly heard about how compounding interest is the eighth wonder of the world, or something along those lines at least. This is the starting place for pretty much every internet finance guru because it's so simple, and honestly, because it scales so well with time, it's important to cover sooner rather than later. Is this really the whole story, though? Welcome to Retained Earnings, where I use my years of corporate finance experience to teach you how to run your money like a business. Before we get into it, I want to note that there's a retained earnings glossary that can be found in the video description. I try to use language that's friendly for everyone, but it's there in case you want a convenient place to read a bunch of terminology that gets thrown around in the world of finance. Now, I don't want to belabor the point of compounding interest, but for the benefit of readers that haven't consumed the glut of personal finance information that's already on the internet, I want to provide a few examples to demonstrate its power. If you're already a certified compound interest enjoyer, feel free to skip to the timestamp that's on your screen now, where we're finally going to get into the alpha of the retained earnings method. The concept of compounding growth is simple. It's getting at the idea that growing things from a percentage basis rather than a fixed dollar amount accelerates scaling. This happens because you're growing off of the baseline, sometimes called the principal, as well as all of the previous growth. If you've ever heard the gotcha brain teaser about whether you should take a penny that doubles in value every day for 30 days or $1 million, that's just a question about compounding. If you haven't heard that one before, you should probably know that penny's worth $5.3 million by the end of the month. You should probably mug that person for the penny. Understanding compound interest is important because it impacts everything you should do financially, apart from just paying your bills at the end of the month. As a practical example, the S&P 500, an index of 500 of the largest public company stocks in the US, has achieved a nominal return of 10.2% per year over the last 20 years. This means that if you invested $10,000 in 2004, you would have over $69,000 in 2024. That means that you've 7x'd your money off of that 10% return. Adjusted for inflation, which has averaged 2.5% every year over those 20 years, your money is still worth over $42,000 in 2004 money. That means that on a real basis, which is the technical term for inflation adjusted, you've still increased your money by over 4.2 times. If that same money sat in a checking account, you would have $10,000 in 2024, but that $10,000 only had the buying power of $6,000 in 2004. As such, you could say that investing over the last 20 years was the difference between quadrupling your savings or almost halving your savings. In other words, if you chose to invest 20 years ago, you're 7 times richer today than you would have been otherwise. Another example is the fact that a person that invests $400 in the market every single month from the age of 20 to 30, which is only $48,000 in total, and then if they never invested again, they would have $1,646,000 at the age of 65. On the other hand, if you have an individual that invests $2,000 every single month from 45 until 65, the person's put in $480,000, and they only have $1.5 million in retirement. That means that despite putting in 1/10 of the money, the individual that started investing sooner has more money at retirement. Pretty wild. So we get that compound interest is incredibly powerful, but do you think that a business is really interested in the 5% cash back they could get on the money that it's storing in its bank account? Are they worried about the $400,000 software developer salary? Because if it were invested in the S&P 500, it would be worth over $1 million in 24 years? If they did, the CEO and CFO would be laughed out of the boardroom and replaced within the next week. It would be ridiculous. This begs the question, if compounding interest is so important and powerful, why aren't there headlines in financial journals about Google's treasury strategy? Why doesn't Apple use the billions of dollars of cash on their balance sheet to buy stocks the way that people are advised to? Why does it seem like Warren Buffett is the only billionaire that's more invested in other people's companies than his own? The reality here is that compounding growth is still incredibly important, but it's different for businesses than for people. There's really 2 main reasons for this. First of all, businesses have access to growth vehicles that are better than 10.2% that they'd get in the market. The reason that anyone invests in any specific business is that they believe that business will earn more money than having it sit in a passive vehicle, no matter how that passive vehicle is compounding. By definition, if your business is growing at pace with the market, it's probably not a good investment. While I'll get into project selection frameworks for businesses in a video that's specifically on the weighted average cost of capital, the reality is that businesses have the opportunity to invest in projects that return money at a higher rate. While business can fundamentally be a risky venture where you can pump billions of dollars into a product that nobody wants, the potential returns can be even bigger. The choice to spend $10 million to get $1 million per year by locking it up in the market is less than the additional net income that buying $10 million in equipment would bring in on a yearly basis. As of the end of 2023, Apple held $41 billion in cash and equivalents on their balance sheet. They can either make $4 billion per year on that money, or they can spend it over the course of 5 to 10 years on developing the Apple Car, which, if they're able to sell to 100,000 customers for $100,000 a piece every year, that means that they're making $10 billion per year on that investment instead. That's it's more than twice as much money. Businesses also just have more levers to pull here. When we're talking about compounding on a personal level, it's only about the length of time. If the business increases the number of users by 5%, the price of their product by 5%, and they decrease their cost by 5%, they just compounded 3 times within a single period, whether that's a month or a year. Rather than a 15% improvement to their margin, on a simple basis, that business is now seeing a 16% improvement on their net income. This means they just compounded their growth without even having to wait for any time to pass. This is the crux of compounding in business. Now, the second big reason why this is so different for businesses than people is that businesses, especially public ones, operate on very different time horizons than people. Fundamentally, you and I have to think long term. After all, there's going to come a time in our lives where we need to spend money even though we're not able to make it. We affectionately call this time retirement. Generally speaking, people are going to have to deal with their finances from age 18 to at least 75, but probably even longer because most people live past 75. A small business may last the entire duration of its owner's career, which means that at the absolute most, that business is operating for 47 years, from the age of 18 to 65. That's already a full 10 years less than the amount of time that people are thinking about their money, and usually businesses are started by older owners, which shortens that time even further. I would hazard a guess that on average, individuals have at least an extra 20 years to make compounding work in their favor than a small business. That's powerful. On the other hand, large public businesses could take on a life of their own and last fundamentally forever. But investors operate on a quarterly schedule, and so you must show your results quarterly. It's really hard to explain to your board why you're only making 2.5% every quarter, because investors are always going to want a bigger and bigger return. If a mature business is spending more money than it's making at any point, it's getting taken out back behind the barn and shut down for good. Fundamentally, the less time you have, the less opportunity there is for long period compounding, which again leads back to the idea that businesses just have to invest in less stable vehicles. Okay, so you're not a business though. In the same way that there are 2 big reasons why corporations don't care that much about investing in the equities market, there's probably 2 big lessons that you should take away for your own personal finances. Businesses choose to invest in their own operations instead of outside opportunities. You should probably recognize that in the same way that they're beating the market with those inside investments, you might be able to beat the market by investing in yourself rather than just equities. The word synergy gets a terrible rap as a buzzword, but if you're able to find synergies in your own life, you should probably hop on that opportunity. The second biggest lesson is that we need to take advantage of the biggest advantage that we have over corporations as individuals. It's the amount of time that we have. So if you're trying to build your financial future like a business, what should you do? Hopefully all of us have a time horizon longer than the next quarter, because honestly, if you're planning to get hit by a bus in the next 3 months, you should probably find a different YouTube video. So because of that, the time part's going to solve itself. You're going to want to invest your money as early as possible and resist the urge to sell it until you absolutely need to. Congratulations, you now have a business plan that's even more foolproof than ever. If you're going to want to do better than that, though, we're going to have to figure out some alternative internal compounding vehicles that will provide better outcomes for us. The first of those might be education. Education doesn't stop with school. By watching this video, you're currently spending your time in order to invest in your financial future. As you acquire more skills and knowledge, your value in the job market increases, potentially leading to higher earnings over time. Additionally, the more you learn, the easier it becomes to learn even more, accelerating your ability to adapt and grow professionally. The meta skill of learning is one that pays dividends over the course of an entire life. Spending just $500 on books and courses early in your career to get a leg up is likely to pay out at a rate that's far better than 10% per year. Many of the wealthiest people I personally know set aside a learning budget for themselves every year. Illustrate this investment with an example. If you spent 1% of your income every year on your education, you might expect that your promotion timeline would change from 4 years to about 2 years. With that promotion, you might expect about a 15% pay bump. What we can see is that over the course of 12 years, your total income with your education spend versus without your education spend is over 4.2 years of additional income. If you look at that as in terms of a growth rate, that's 14.76%, which is almost 50% better than the S&P 500. The hardest part here, and the thing that I don't have the answer for your precise life, is deciding what to spend your education budget on. It could be anything from investing in a certification for your career to a book on personal finance. Before you start spending, though, it's really important to note that not all education is created equal. Studying and paying for qualification's sake can be a huge waste of effort and money. For instance, most fields don't actually pay any extra money for candidates that have a master's degree as opposed to a bachelor's. There are many other reasons that a degree like this may be valuable to you, whether that's the increased richness of life that you have from that additional education to an improved network. But if you're doing it for financial reasons, you really should ask the people that are on your desired career path if they think that the certification is worthwhile. A second place where you can find this compounding return is in your career effort and attainment. I think there's probably fundamentally two different types of people in the workforce. There are those that work as hard as they possibly can in an attempt to win the rat race as fast as possible through promotions and the praise of their superiors, and those that recognize that they get paid pretty much the same whether they put in maximum effort or minimum effort. While I think very few people ever move from one group to the other, and the reality is that they both have their own pros and cons, it may be helpful to recognize that your level of effort at work is an investment just like anything else. The cost here is your time outside of your 9 to 5, your mental effort and strain, or maybe even developing a business persona that just doesn't align with the rest of your life. But the returns are financial in nature. You might see an accelerated career path, and because of that, more external opportunities might mean higher income sooner. Because income generally increases on a percentage basis, this effort and energy forms a virtuous compounding growth cycle. As such, it may be worthwhile to really put your head down in your 20s and 30s to diminish any potential penalty that you'd receive from missing your children's soccer games at age 40. Time and money spent building your professional network can also pay dividends in a similar way. Making even just a single work friend can open up the door and introduce you to 10 of their acquaintances. Now, not all of those 10 acquaintances are going to have anything that you can gain from financially or personally, but, maybe 1 in 100 might. That just means that you don't have to go that far out of your way to make that many professional connections before you have formed the cycle where people are coming to you because you're the Excel guru or the guy that makes everybody laugh at lunch or during coffee breaks. This can pay dividends both financially as a result of exposure to the new opportunities, as well as in friendship and life satisfaction. Changing gears to the cost side of the spectrum, an underrated facet of consumption is that anything that you buy is going to come with unexpected companion costs. Are you going out for dinner instead of eating at home? Maybe you're also going to get an appetizer or dessert, even though you wouldn't necessarily do that at home. Are you buying a new couch? It's probably time to buy that new throw pillow or blanket or whatever you think looks great with it too. If you look back to last year's Stanley Cup craze, there's a great example there where people took their already extraordinarily expensive $50 to $150 water bottles and started accessorizing them and built a whole market of accessories for your water bottle. Even personally, I'm guilty of buying an immersion circulator for my kitchen and then deciding, well, actually, I probably need a vacuum sealer to really use this effectively. That $100 purchase just became a $250 purchase. While it's easy to chalk this up to lifestyle inflation, the insidious bit is that our spending has a compounding growth element to it. By recognizing this early on in your life and focusing on purchasing just items that truly make you happy, you can save a lot more money than just the $20 that the Live, Laugh, Love sign is costing you in the store. By no means am I strongly advocating that everybody lives like a 23-year-old bachelor that's happy in his room as long as there's a frameless mattress and a PlayStation. But there's something about that mindset that can make your income stretch considerably further. I challenge everyone watching this right now to pick one category of item that they just don't actually care that much about and choose not to buy anything in that category for a full year. See how that makes you feel, and you may just have developed a compounding savings for a year to come. Personally, this year, I'm not spending anything on Halloween decorations. Mentorship is another avenue through which you can find outsized compounding returns in your life. In exchange for whatever cost it takes to acquire a high-quality mentor for yourself, the gains are going to far outstrip the costs over the course of a full career. Whether that cost is putting in nights and weekends to impress your manager's manager or taking a whole bunch of people that do interesting things online out to coffee. To share a very practical and numbers-driven example, let's go through how this would work in a purely financial sense. Let's imagine an individual that makes $75,000 a year right now, but they have an opportunity to go to a conference that We'll expose them to a new mentor, within an industry that they're really hoping to break into. We would expect that between airfare and tickets and all those things, it costs them about $1,000 to go to that conference. Now, if they find a new job based on that mentor, or are managed to get promoted in their existing job as a result of this new mentor, they'd probably get about a 15% pay bump. And then let's assume that for every year after that, they also have kind of a standard inflation-based salary adjustment. Now, if they have 30 years left in their career and they're just trying to beat the S&P 500 rate of 10.2%, what does that look like? Well, what we see is that over the course of the remaining 30 years of their career, they make $477,000 more in their job. If you look at that just based on a $1,000 cost, that's an effective growth rate of 22.8% on that money. That means that you can take 25 or 26 shots on goal before you're just breaking even with the S&P 500. I can't imagine it taking more than that for anybody. It's easily outperforming putting your money in the market. Now, I think it's fair to disagree with all the assumptions that I've laid out there, but I have shared a copy of all the formulas I used to make those calculations in a Google sheet that you can find in the description. Feel free to plug in your own assumptions to the sheet and see how it turns out. You might be surprised. I would argue that the previous model is actually kind of conservative rather than aggressive, as these relationships tend to show their benefits at multiple points over the course of a career. The general story here is that the gains that you're going to receive from this type of action are greatly amplified by time, as making subtle career changes early on can have a severe compounding effect on your career. I think it's also really important to note that the value of mentorship goes both ways. There's no better way to learn something than to teach someone else. From a personal development perspective, I've always felt that I've learned more from my discussion with the people I'm mentoring than the people mentoring me. These discussions always require me to sharpen my thinking in a new way. This has led me to taking management positions earlier in my career, and due to compounding, that may well amount to millions of dollars over the course of my career. Be sure not to underrate the power of giving, because it has a strange way of coming back to you. One final place where you can see a disproportionate compounding is in your health. According to a 2022 study by Fidelity, the average 65-year-old couple should expect to spend $315,000 on healthcare in their retirement. With that said, the average American couple certainly has not been paying attention to their health over the last 10 to 20 years of their life. While I'm certainly no health and fitness expert, I'll refer you to Jeff Nippard for that, link in the description. I do believe that some more people may be willing to put effort into their health if they recognize that there was also a financial benefit that comes with it. Let's imagine a world where you get a really nice gym membership and splurge on all of the healthiest items at the grocery store. By my estimation, that should cost an individual roughly $300 a month more. And if you're a couple, that number might be closer to $500 for the two of you. If you do this from the age of 55 to 65, you've more than halved your expected retirement healthcare costs, which is a reduction of $157,500. You spend a total of $60,000, which means that if you were actively investing that money at a 10% return, you spent $96,921. But this means that you outperform the market by over 50% by investing in your health, because you made $157,000 instead of $97,000. And that's even before any of the intangible benefits of a healthier life, like being able to be active at an older age or being more attractive in the meantime. As we mentioned life synergies at the top of the sections, it's worth pointing out that there's an opportunity here too. If you're learning how to cook healthy food for yourself, you're having an immediate compounding effect where you're seeing a food cost reduction as well as a reduction in the long tail of your health costs. And while all of these methods may be very helpful for you, they all are seasonal in nature. It's important to recognize that methods of extraordinary compounding are never going to be sustainable forever. If you feel like you've really squeezed these buckets dry, you should stop investing in these vehicles and go back to the default case of putting your money in a brokerage and take advantage of your long investing time frame. We're only considering these alternative routes because they can provide greater returns, but there are diminishing returns on each. So if you're no longer getting the returns you're expecting, stop spending. If you have another alternative compounding vehicle that you've created in your life, please share it in the comments down below. I'd love to read them and share the best in a future retained earnings post. Next week, we're going to kick off the multi-part series on measuring your financial well-being and building your very own internal finance department.